All right, let's dive in. Today we're going deep into some pretty fascinating stuff. Love, shame, and rewriting your story. Kind of a wild mix, right?
That is, yeah.
We've got a whole stack of sources here. Everything from like Marianne Williamson's spiritual perspective in A Return to Love to, The Hard Science of the Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
It's a pretty eclectic mix.
Yeah, but what's so interesting is even though they're all coming at it from such different angles, they all seem to be saying the same thing, Like we have this incredible power to heal and transform.
Yeah.
Totally. So, okay, let's jump right in. Williamson starts A Return to Love with this really powerful statement. She says that our true purpose is to, co-create with a higher power through love.
Right.
And anything else, she says.
Yeah.
Basically, that's where all the pain comes from, when we stray from that path.
Yeah, and what I find interesting is how she distinguishes that love, the kind she's talking about, from the everyday kind of love. She talks about this third eye. It's like this higher level of perception that's needed to really experience that transformative love.
It's like she's describing that feeling of yearning for something more. Have you ever felt that? Like, there's got to be something beyond what we normally experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And Williamson says the thing that blocks us from that is fear, like fear coming from the ego.
Okay, the ego. I've always found that a bit of a tricky concept, how does she actually define it?
Well, she describes it as thought that's become separated from love, a defense mechanism.
Right.
It leads us down this path of fear and separateness. It's constantly trying to protect us, even if it means keeping us stuck in familiar patterns that aren't really good for us.
That makes me think of Dr. Joe Dispenza and his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yes.
He talks about how our bodies can actually be shaped by our minds, like running these subconscious programs. And they keep us trapped in those, negative loops.
Exactly, yeah. Our bodies become hardwired for those familiar feelings, even if they're not serving us. But Dispenza offers some really cool ways to break free from that.
Okay.
But before we get to that, let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about shame.
Ooh, heavy stuff.
Yeah, John Bradshaw really dives into that in Healing the Shame That Binds You. I mean, that opening line alone, shame is the source of countless inner struggles.
Wow.
It's a powerful statement. And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to argue that, this toxic shame is at the root of so many problems, not just personal struggles, but even societal issues, violence and war even.
So we're not talking about just feeling embarrassed here.
No.
This is something much deeper.
Much deeper, yeah. And one of the things I found really insightful is how he links shame to self-rejection.
Yeah.
It's this feeling of not being worthy,
Like deep down.
Yeah, deep down eating away at us.
It's something I think we can all relate to on some level, right? Like not feeling good enough.
Totally. But Bradshaw offers a path to healing, and it takes courage. Forgiveness.
Oh, wow.
He even wrote a whole other book on it, the Book of Forgiving.
Okay.
And he argues that forgiveness is the only way to really escape that shame and experience true healing and freedom.
Okay, but this is where I get stuck. Forgiveness. Especially when someone's really hurt you.
Right.
It just feels impossible, like you're letting them off the hook or something.
I know, it's a tough concept, and Bradshaw gets that.
Yeah.
He's really clear that forgiveness isn't about condoning what they did or even forgetting it. It's about letting go of that resentment and anger, for yourself.
So it's more like it's an act of self-care almost.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
You're not doing it for them, you're doing it for you, so you can be free from that pain.
That makes a lot of sense. And you know what this makes me think of? The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk.
Oh, yeah.
This book was a total eye-opener for me. He really challenges the way we think about trauma. It's not just the event itself, it's how it gets stuck in our bodies.
Literally embedded.
Yeah.
Affecting us in all these ways we don't even realize.
Totally. And I was so fascinated by this idea of dissociation, where we kind of split off from these overwhelming experiences to cope. It explains why sometimes we can feel completely disconnected.
Yeah.
Or we overreact to things.
It's like echoes of the past coming back to haunt us.
Yeah. And van der Kolk says that healing from that requires more than just talking about it. It's about reconnecting with our bodies, addressing that deep physical impact.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not just about the memories and the emotions. It's about how trauma has shaped us, physically.
Yeah. And he talks about all these therapies that emphasize that mind-body connection.
Right, like EMDR.
Yoga. Even theater.
It's a whole different approach than just talk therapy.
Right. But it makes sense when you think about how deeply trauma can affect us. So, okay, we've talked about love, shame, trauma. The big question is, how do we actually rewrite our stories? How do we create a new reality? I'm thinking maybe Dr. Joe Dispenza has some answers for us.
He does.
Okay.
In Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, he gives this 7-step process for personal transformation.
Right.
And it all starts with awareness, like recognizing those unconscious programs that are running in the background, keeping us stuck.
He talks a lot about visualization, right?
Yeah.
Emotionally embracing the future we want. I have to admit, sometimes that stuff feels a little, out there for me.
I get it. But what Dispenza is really saying is that our minds have the power to shape our reality. It's about consciously directing our thoughts and emotions towards the experiences we want.
So it's not just wishful thinking.
No.
It's about actively creating a new blueprint.
Exactly. It's about moving from feeling like a victim of our circumstances to realizing we can shape them. And that idea of stepping into our power, that's a big theme in Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life.
Oh, I love Louise Hay.
Me too.
She's all about self-love.
Yes. Self-approval.
Yeah.
She has this simple exercise. You repeat the affirmation, I approve of myself, over and over, for a month.
For a whole month.
Yeah, it might sound silly, but she says it's a really powerful way to, reprogram those deep beliefs we have about ourselves.
I have to admit, saying that out loud, I approve of myself, it just feels, I don't know, a bit awkward.
Yeah.
Almost narcissistic,
I know, it can feel weird, especially if we're used to beating ourselves up.
Yeah.
But Hay says that awkwardness, that's just the ego resisting,
Yeah.
It's like the ego saying, wait a minute, who are you to approve of yourself?
Trying to hold on to those old patterns.
Exactly. But the more we practice self-approval, the more those old beliefs start to loosen their grip. And we can create a new reality based on self-love.
So we've covered so much ground here.
Yeah, we have.
Love, shame, trauma. But it feels like all these sources are ultimately saying we have the power to heal, to rewrite our stories.
That's right. And what I think is really fascinating is how these different perspectives, they start to connect.
Yeah.
Like van der Kolk, he talks about the importance of befriending our inner experience to heal from trauma.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, could embracing self-approval, like Louise Hay suggests, be a crucial part of that?
Oh, that's a good point. You start to realize that these ideas, they're all connected.
They are.
Like pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah, and there are so many more connections to explore.
I know. Well, before we get too carried away, I think it's time for us to take a break.
Okay.
Let our listeners process all this amazing stuff. We'll be back soon to dive even deeper into these connections and see what practical wisdom we can glean from these sources.
It's interesting. As we were talking about self-approval and that idea of befriending our inner experience, it made me think about another connection between the sources. Forgiveness.
Oh.
And the role it plays in healing from trauma.
Right.
Remember how John Bradshaw in the book of Forgiving, he says that forgiveness is like the only real path to breaking free from shame and then experiencing that deep healing.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how that connects with Bessel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score.
Totally.
Even though he's coming at it from a totally different perspective. Neuroscience and trauma.
Yeah, he talks about how that trauma gets trapped in the body.
Right.
And it can cause all these physical and emotional issues. But he also says that finding ways to process and release that trapped energy, that's key for healing to happen.
And that's where forgiveness comes in, right?
Exactly.
Because if we're holding on to all that resentment and anger, it's like we're keeping those wounds open.
Yeah, exactly. It's like forgiveness, as Bradshaw describes it, it's not about condoning what that person did.
Right.
It's about freeing yourself from all that pain and bitterness.
Yeah, like finally cutting those cords
Yeah.
that have been holding us back,
I love that image. And it really highlights something important. Forgiveness, it's not about the other person. It's about getting your own well-being back.
Right, because if we're carrying all that baggage around, it's hard to be present to build healthy relationships.
Yeah.
To experience joy.
Absolutely, yeah. All that unhealed trauma, unresolved resentment, it creates barriers to intimacy, connection. It can keep us stuck in those patterns of self-sabotage.
So it's almost like forgiveness is a prerequisite to, living a more fulfilling life.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely not an easy path, though. Bradshaw even says it can be incredibly challenging,
Oh, yeah.
especially when you've been deeply hurt.
But, I appreciate that he doesn't try to sugarcoat it.
Mm.
He acknowledges how hard it is, but also emphasizes how transformative it can be.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that forgiveness, it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing practice, choosing love and compassion over bitterness and resentment.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard. And that reminds me of Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Oh, yeah.
In Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, he talks about conscious effort, how we can literally rewire our brains
Yeah.
through dedication and practice. And I think that applies to forgiveness, too. Actively choosing to let go of those patterns, to cultivate a more forgiving attitude.
So it's not about forcing yourself to forget or condone what happened.
Yeah.
It's about making a choice
Yes.
to let go of the pain.
Yes, to move forward with peace and understanding.
And as we do that,
Yeah.
it's like we create space for new possibilities.
Absolutely. You free up all that energy that was stuck in the past.
Yeah.
And you can focus on creating the experiences you want.
Which brings us back to that idea from Dispenza about actively shaping our reality.
Yes.
Moving beyond just reacting to what's happening to us.
It's about becoming the creators
Right.
of our own experiences. He emphasizes visualization,
Yeah.
really embracing the future you want.
It's like shifting from victimhood to empowerment.
It is.
Taking the wheel.
Yes, I love that. That's such a great analogy. And it really highlights how much control we actually have.
Yes.
It's not about denying the challenges, it's about choosing how you respond
Right.
and creating the future you want.
Which is a pretty radical idea when you think about it. It's like we're not just pawns in some cosmic game.
Yeah.
We're active participants.
You are. And that belief that you have the power to create change, it's incredibly empowering.
I'm feeling inspired, but also a little overwhelmed. It's like, where do I even begin with all this?
Well, I think a good place to start is self-awareness. Remember how van der Kolk talks about befriending your inner experience?
Yeah.
Becoming aware of those sensations, emotions, thoughts that are coming up.
He says that awareness without judgment is like the foundation for everything.
It is, yeah.
Oh.
For healing, for growth. And it's also the foundation for conscious creation. Because once you're aware of what's going on inside, then you can start to see those patterns and beliefs that aren't serving you anymore.
Like shining a light on those dark corners of our minds.
Yes, exactly. Bringing it all into the light of awareness. And then you have a choice.
Right?
And that's where Marianne Williamson's work comes in, A Return to Love.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about how fear coming from the ego, that's one of the biggest blocks
Yeah.
to experiencing love and creating a fulfilling life.
And she says the ego, it wants to keep us small, reinforce those limiting beliefs.
Exactly. Like it's always whispering in your ear, you're not good enough. You're not worthy. You can't do it.
Oh yeah, I know that voice.
We all do. And if we're not careful, we start to believe it. Let it shape our reality.
It's so true.
But the good news is we have a choice. We can choose to listen to a different voice.
Right.
The voice of love.
Our higher selves.
Yeah. The voice that tells us we are worthy, we are capable, and we deserve all the good things in life.
So it's about becoming aware of those voices of fear.
Yeah.
And then choosing to replace them with more empowering beliefs.
Exactly. And that's where Louise Hay's self-approval practice is so powerful. When you genuinely approve of yourself,
Yeah.
accept yourself, flaws and all, that's the foundation of self-love.
That allows us to break free.
Yes. And as you let go of those layers of self-doubt, you open yourself up to a whole new way of experiencing the world. You start to see yourself and others differently, through the lens of love and compassion.
And then our relationships transform too.
Absolutely. You attract people who mirror that love and acceptance.
Wow.
And it creates this beautiful cycle of support and growth.
And it all starts with that one simple act of choosing to approve of yourself.
It does.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these ideas from our different sources, they're all pointing in the same direction.
Yeah.
That we have the power to heal, to transform, to create a life filled with love.
And it's not just some abstract philosophy.
Right.
This is a lived reality. It's available to everyone.
It's about taking these insights and putting them into practice.
Exactly, yeah. Becoming conscious creators. Choosing love over fear.
Forgiveness over resentment.
Self-acceptance over self-criticism.
You know what? We've covered so much here, I almost feel like we need another break,
Maybe we do.
just to let it all sink in. But we're going to come back
We will.
with some practical tips and strategies for actually applying these concepts in our lives.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive exploring love, shame, and the power of rewriting our stories.
We've been talking about these big concepts, love, forgiveness, self-acceptance, but I think it's time to get practical.
Totally.
Like, how can we actually take these ideas and apply them in our everyday lives?
Well, I think one of the most powerful things we can do is to start paying attention to our thoughts.
Okay.
Like really becoming aware of that inner dialogue. Because often those thoughts, they're running on autopilot. And a lot of times they're not even true.
Right, like all those negative self-talk loops.
Exactly. Like, I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to do that.
Ugh, I know those all too well.
Right. But once we start to notice those thoughts, we can actually choose to challenge them.
So it's like we're taking back control.
Yes. It's about becoming the observer of our thoughts rather than just being swept away by them.
That makes me think of the 7-step process that Dr. Joe Dispenza outlines in Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Oh, yeah, great connection.
He talks about recognizing those unconscious programs
Right.
and then consciously redirecting them.
Exactly. And one of the steps he emphasizes is admitting. It's like owning up to those negative patterns and then surrendering them. It's a powerful process.
It sounds intense.
It can be, but it's also incredibly liberating because once we surrender those old patterns, we create space for something new to emerge.
And that's where the creating step comes in, right?
Yes. It's about consciously designing the life we want.
He talks a lot about visualization and really emotionally connecting with that vision.
Right, and that's where the power of the mind-body connection comes in. Remember Bessel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score?
Oh, yeah.
He talks about how trauma gets stuck in the body, but he also says that healing requires reconnecting with our bodies.
Right, right. And he mentions therapies like EMDR and yoga.
Exactly. These are all about working with the body to release that trapped energy and create new pathways for healing.
So it's like we're not just changing our minds.
Yeah.
We're actually changing our bodies, too.
Exactly. And when we do that, we're not only healing from the past, we're also creating a new future.
And it makes me wonder about the role of forgiveness in all of this.
Oh, that's such an important piece.
Remember how John Bradshaw in Book of Forgiving says forgiveness is the only way to true freedom?
Yeah, he's adamant about that.
It makes me think that maybe forgiveness is like a key that unlocks that mind-body connection.
That's a really interesting way to put it. It's like when we forgive, we're releasing that tension, that grip that the past has on us.
And that allows us to fully inhabit our bodies in the present moment.
I love that. And when we're truly present, we can tap into that higher love that Marianne Williamson talks about in A Return to Love.
It's like that third eye opens up.
Yeah. And we start to see the world through a different lens, a lens of compassion, understanding, and connection.
So, okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. We become aware of our thoughts, we choose to forgive, we reconnect with our bodies, and we start to see the world through the eyes of love.
That's beautiful.
But, I think the most important piece of the puzzle might be that simple act of self-approval that Louise Hay talks about.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like the foundation for everything else.
It is, because when you approve of yourself, you're essentially saying yes to your own existence.
Right, you're acknowledging your own worthiness.
Exactly. And from that place of self-acceptance, everything else becomes possible.
Wow, that's really powerful. So it sounds like what all these sources are pointing to is a journey of self-discovery, healing, and transformation. And it's a journey that starts within.
It does. It starts with recognizing our own inherent power.
To heal, to forgive, to love.
And to create a life that truly reflects who we are at our core.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
And
So many insights, so much to think about.
I know, and I hope our listeners feel inspired to explore these ideas further and embark on their own journeys of transformation.
Because as we've learned, we have the power to rewrite our stories. We just have to choose to pick up the pen.